Well, it's that time again, that time when we step into the virtual bar and discuss a less cheerful topic in today's series. We've been calling mental health in the church. This will be part 4 of this series. I'm joined today by Greg and Ken, and I'm your host, Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar. One might say that this is actually a fitting conversation for us.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
We
the topic.
Probably need a lot of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of mental healths.
We have one of the highest stress jobs in the U.S.
Do we?
If we do it well.
Is that true?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a anything that I can refer to.
I don't
say,
have any actual evidence, but I'm pretty sure.
Well, when I show up here, I get stressed. Just being around you guys. So yeah, I would venture to say that you're looking it up.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Let's be amazed.
Well, who
my-
knows?
Get all statistical here.
At my glibness.
Who can really know anymore? It ranks 9th.
Behind? Does it give you the
So
top
according
10?
to Forbes, let's see.
We made the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Wait a minute. No, I don't think.
No.
Oh, no. Number 5.
Wow.
Yeah, we're moving on up.
Yeah, number 5. Right. It's above corporate CEO, editor for a newspaper, and mayor.
Oh. I talked to Steve about this.
It's kind of all of those things, isn't it?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yep.
As a head
Probably.
pastor.
Below first responders, law enforcement.
Yeah,
military.
it doesn't go beyond that, because the article that I looked up from christianpost.com was about the pastor and the ranking that it has among the most stressful jobs in the world. And it ranks 5th. Along with rabbi, mullah, or other holy leader.
Mm.
So apparently taking care of people's spiritual needs is pretty stressful.
Mm-hmm.
More stressful than a United States congressperson, who's number 8.
What do they have to worry about?
They don't.
They make their own laws.
What do they
and
even do?
Set their own.
That's the question. What do they even do?
Yeah.
They don't even do
Did you
anything.
see, you
There's
see Nancy Pelosi's latest claim to fame?
no.
Oh, Lord.
Tell us.
Oh, she got the Congressional Medal of Freedom, didn't she?
Yes.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
President Biden laid it on her. Yes.
But of course.
She's such a hero.
she's such a freedom
Yeah,
fighter.
such a freedom
Mhm.
fighter. She stood for all those people that were burning down cities not too long ago. Yeah, it's a strange world we live in. That's for sure.
Is she on the stress list?
No, but people who support her are.
Or
Yeah, they're like number 2. Yeah. I'll look that up later to see who the rest of them are. But so in any case, it is time. That's right. For everyone's favorite part of the show. We need to have a drum roll effect right there.
you got one?
No, we don't have a drum roll. We have a rim shot, but it's not as exciting.
Or like a bugle call.
Either that or a dum dum dum.
Kazoo.
Okay.
Dragon.
A kazoo.
Kazoo. I'm gonna get a kazoo and bring it in and do it myself.
Okay.
All right, Ken, hit us with the disclaimer.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the respective speakers and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, policies, or doctrines of Athol Baptist Church and its members.
That gives us a free reign, doesn't it?
Not really.
Come on.
I mean, you can't commit libel.
Well, you can. You just
Well, I
you're not
mean,
supposed to.
it's a crime, so yeah, you can go to civil court for that. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, but I guess do what you like. So This is an interesting one to lead this up with. Exodus 20:13, you shall not murder. That's an interesting question. You'll see why in a second. So here, just on April 23rd, Senior Pastor Gene Jacobs failed to show up at a meeting at Real Life Ministries in Silver Valley. Hours later, his body was found by authorities in an area where he often hiked and with an alleged self-inflicted gunshot wound. The investigation is still ongoing. So meanwhile, Jacob's family and his coworkers and his church and the Silver Valley community have been shocked and are asking questions that might not ever be answered this side of eternity. Since this is a topic that pastors would likely talk about in a bar, and certainly it is topics that pastors have talked about in closed doors,
Yes.
for sure, here recently. We'll be talking about it today. And we're not going to speculate about what led to Pastor Jacobs' decision, if that turns out to be true, but rather we want to discuss the effects this could or should have for the rest of us. Because, I mean, if we got to learn something from this, and obviously with, pastors' jobs are extremely stressful. I don't think people really fully can grasp the gravity of how stressful that this job can be until they have been in it. It's kind of like law enforcement or anything like that, where, you can talk about it, but until you're there sitting in the seat with them, you just can't really understand the impact of it. I
always look back on Pastor Richard sitting in one of our pastoral staff meetings. I don't know, maybe he was involved for a couple of months, and he just said, I had no idea what this involved. What you guys were up against, what you guys were doing, the negative that comes after us. And so that has always kind of stuck with me, because he recognized something that I think we forget about sometimes in the process of doing our jobs.
Yeah, I think one of the differences between pastors and law enforcement officers is law enforcement officers see people at their worst or at their worst time. We see a lot of them can be close to their worst times, but we also see them at their best time. And so you have to reconcile those two, and see the spiritual dynamic at work in both.
And and Pastor Richard was ISP at the time, and so he was in two very high stress positions.
Yeah. I guess here at the beginning we should probably extend our condolences to the Jacobs family, and say right here, we're not trying to exploit what's happened to him or them or the church, but like Chris said, we want to try and learn something from this, help others understand a little bit better, have some compassion, and in the church, strengthen ourselves, gird ourselves up a little bit more, because the stress is only going to get more and more as time goes on.
Yeah.
And we need to watch out for one another. We need to be transparent and honest with one another, and not bring any reproach on the name of Christ.
Yeah, for sure.
And for those of you that understand the pressures and the stress that your pastors are under, know this: we know it, and Chris has done an excellent job, I think, of putting in place some stopgaps for us so that we do not end up in these emotionally impactful situations where we don't know where to turn.
Yeah, so every Tuesday morning we have our pastor huddle or rendezvous. What did we call it?
Rendezvous.
I can't even remember what
You
we
named
called
it.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
I didn't name that.
Who came up with rendezvous?
That's a Kenism, is what
Is that
that
a
is.
Ken-
Yeah.
What? You talking to me?
In any case, we spend a good hour and a half just kind of going over things that are going on in our lives. And typically, it ends up just being a lot of kind of just goofy stuff or whatever. Sometimes it's even just an hour of just joking around and being dumb, but
imagine that.
Or just talking about what's going on in the world or whatever. But if you do that enough times, eventually what's going to happen is someone's going to have some kind of serious issue going on. And it just gives that space where, you can actually, express those things. And it's just really important for people to have places where they can talk about what's going on in their lives without people, judging them or whatever the case may be. And I think for pastors, it's really difficult to open up about what's going on in their lives, because in reality, the only people that a lot of pastors feel like they can trust is their spouse. And then at some point, you've loaded so much on your spouse that you're just
causing problems for them.
Yeah, you're causing problems in your marriage. And
that's an interesting point, because I read an article just yesterday of a pastor's wife who committed suicide.
Yeah.
In North Carolina. And nobody saw that coming.
Yeah.
She did have some mental issues going on over time, but at the time that she did it, everybody thought she was doing good.
Was this the lady who her husband came and preached that day, and then at the end of the message announced that she had...
Yeah, it was the night before. Then he goes, preaches, and at the end announces his wife committed suicide, and the funeral will be the following Sunday. I mean, that's fast-tracking it.
That was kind of weird, wasn't it?
That almost sounds like
and then if you listen to his message, he's like jovial and joking and like just like a normal kind of like day message.
Wow.
Like you cannot possibly be that detached from your emotions that you can just shut them off to preach a message like you just normally do.
I couldn't.
Something seems strange there to me.
Wrong.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be out of the house that day or that month.
But even if the worst ends up being true in that scenario, you have worse mental health issues than you had the other way around.
Yeah. If he was that detached from his relationship, then there's your reason, it seems.
Yeah.
That she would be that despondent.
Yeah. And unfortunately, pastors are in this position where they are not allowed to have any moral corruption at all. And if you express that to an individual, then it turns into gossip. And then all of a sudden you find that you're in a position to where you lose your job because you are struggling with X, Y, or Z. And that's just kind of been the modus operandi for, centuries. And so what it does is it just tells pastors to just suck it up and seal it up and, never talk about it again. And, pastors have done that to themselves by a large degree. And a lot of pastors would disagree with me, but I think one of those areas that really happens a lot with is sexual sins, especially related to like pornography. If any pastor were to come to a congregant and confess that he was struggling with the sin of pornography, he would be out the door in 10 minutes. That would have been spread so fast that it would have made your head spin, and then he would just be out of a job. Because
possibly out of a career.
Yeah. And is that right? Is it wrong? I think that it's unfair. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
To hold them up to a standard that is impossible for people.
Well, that the rest of the world isn't held up to.
Well, the rest of the world, nothing. I mean, Christians. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to throw out another statistics. Like half the pastors in the U.S. have some form of pornography addiction.
I would say that's probably pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
And even more than that, I mean, there's pastors out there struggling with all kinds of sins.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be the big ones like pornography or whatever. You have pastors out there that are struggling with substance abuse, with alcoholism, with prescription pills. You have pastors out there that are struggling with anger and frustration. You have pastors out there that are struggling with worry. And a lot of times that worry ends up turning into something like substance abuse. And unfortunately, at the front end of any of those situations, they don't really have anywhere to go, because if they go to anybody, it's going to be a gossip fest, and then they're going to be out of a job. And so, I mean, it really is a very difficult position. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, about what we can learn from all of this. But I think before we get too far into that, we kind of need to talk about his legacy first, because there's a lot of like questions that are floating around and things that people are saying that kind of need to be addressed, and things that we need to think about as far as how we deal with these things when they happen. And the first one is that that for some reason, because he committed suicide, that he's in hell. And this is just patently not true, and it's absolutely absurd. I know that it's a trope that Catholicism believes that if you commit suicide that you go to hell, but actually there's more criteria involved in that as far as the catechism is concerned. Like, for something to be a mortal sin, there has to be 3 criteria met. It has to be a grave, what do they call it? A grave matter, which means that it has to be serious or deadly or something to that nature. You have to knowingly participate in it without regard to the consequence. And there's a third one as well. And most Catholics do not believe that you commit all 3 of those when you commit suicide. I don't know that I agree with that. I think if I were a Catholic, I'd probably argue about it. But even that, I mean, that's changed over time. But as far as like Baptist doctrine or Baptist ideology, there's no scripture to support the idea that you're treated any differently as a born-again believer if you commit suicide, or whether you die in the process of drinking and driving. I mean, there's no difference. It's like death is death. It's the consequence of sin. And if you're redeemed, then you no longer have to pay the eternal consequence of sin. So you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, this is such a deep-seated topic with so many people. It's so emotional that it's so rare for somebody to say, old Bob committed suicide last night, and everybody goes, yeah, well, I saw that coming, no big deal.
Yeah.
It's always, what? No way. I never expected that. I never saw that coming. What was going on? So it's one of those things that it sets us back. For me, and when I heard about this, I was like, oh my gosh, what was that man going through to get to this point of despair in his life, where you can do that. You can take your own life, if in fact that's what he did. So for me, I started looking up, in the Bible, people that had taken their own lives, and there's a ton of scripture about people that were wanting to die, asking God to take their life, that total despair. But in most of those cases, Solomon, Elijah, Jonah, a couple of them that I wrote down, they all were despairing of life. And yet, because they did not end it, God ultimately brought them back to a place of fruitfulness within life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is, what we just talked about. You brought us in, you bring us in, and we sit around and we talk about, we joke about, but every now and then somebody says something about, hey, my wife is going through this. I got a kid that's struggling here. Whatever that situation is, and then we address it.
Yeah.
We talk about it. Okay, so what do we do as a pastoral staff? How do we move forward in this situation and support whoever it is that's struggling? And so I started to say earlier that congregation, if you're listening to this, we're okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have the what would you call it? Stop gaps in place already to prevent this. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, wrap your arm around us every Sunday, or however often you can, and say, I appreciate you. Hey, good sermon, or whatever it is. To keep our spirits up, because it is a job that, most people don't see what's going on.
Our congregation is
behind
typically really good at that.
Yeah.
Our congregation is very encouraging for the most part.
Yes. Yeah.
You'll get the outlier every once in a while where someone will do something that's just hurtful. And the bizarre thing about that type of behavior is that you could have 1,000 people speaking positive things into your life,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll be that one person speaking something negative into your life that will consume your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so weird how that works out. Your mind will not allow you to dwell on all of the positive things. It will only let you think about the one negative thing.
Well, here's a thought. Maybe this applies in Pastor Jacob's case, maybe not. That we hold ourselves to a very, very high standard.
Mm-hmm.
I know I do. I don't know about you guys.
What do you know that we don't know?
Nothing.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I just know I'm super self-critical. I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I see every little thing I could have done better, did wrong, misstep, misspoke, whatever it is, and that sticks with me, and I have to consciously, explicitly, intentionally shove that into the right box and put it under the cross, really.
Mm-hmm.
That he does not hold me up to perfection. Why do I believe that I need to hold myself up to perfection? If his grace is sufficient for me, it's sufficient entirely for me. And I need to swallow my pride and accept that I am just another guy with similar faults and weaknesses, and just pray for strength and the ability to overcome those things.
Do you think that's it comes about knowledge of the word, realizing that, nothing on this earth or in the spiritual realm can snatch us from his hand. We're sealed.
Yeah.
And we, if somebody is so much in despair that they have forgotten that, I can see it, headed down that road, to self-destruction. But, for me, I'm older. I've lived a pretty good life, long time, been following Christ for 40 years now. And it is, I don't have much despair. Most of mine's joy. Looking back, looking forward. I go down a little rabbit hole. I was cleaning up something around my desk at home, and I picked up this box, and it was heavy. And I thought, what the heck's in there? Well, it was photographs, hundreds and hundreds of photographs.
What are those?
They're digital images that go on paper.
What?
They're pictures on your phone that you can put on paper. It's pretty amazing.
That's
Yeah, I'll
bonkers.
show you some sometime.
Like a Polaroid?
Who does that?
Oh, no, not that old.
Oh,
I do have those too, though. But they were from my days as a youth leader. And I spent the next hour thumbing through these photographs.
Reminiscing.
Reminiscing. And I when I was like, man, I got stuff to do. I can't do this anymore. But I walked away smiling, thinking, wow, I've had a good life.
Stored that up in his heart.
It did. I felt good, walking down the stairs and, going back out and starting to do some more mudding in my shop. And
that'll take the joy out of you real quick.
That'll put you in a bad mood.
But that's what I'm saying. If we have the legacy, the memories, the good times, we can persevere. And I think a lot of, I'm thinking Gene here, what was he going through that he was not able to forgive himself for? Which is what, if what we think happened.
And talking to his friends, and I'm good friends with a lot of the people that he was familiar with. I talked with Jim and Corey over at the North Campus, and we're real good friends. I'm awfully critical of their philosophy of ministry, but don't be mistaken. I love those guys dearly and the work that they're doing over there. And in talking with them, there's no question that he was saved, that his fruits were evident in his work, that he was dedicated to his flock. He was excited to talk about the future. And he had just done some fantastic stuff there in that community. He was well respected. So, it doesn't do any good speculating over his kind of mental, physical, or spiritual state that led to his death. I don't think people should assume that there's any kind of scandalous sin in his life or anything like that. The truth of it is that it could have just been something as simple as 3 people in his church didn't feel like he was doing what they wanted him to do, and so they just started a campaign of just being, malignant or whatever, malicious. And, that will destroy you emotionally. I don't care who you are. It will wipe you out. If it goes on long enough, it can put feelings of anxiety in you that, you'd have to, everybody has experienced that moment, when you've got that hole in the center of your chest that just doesn't seem to fill up. And it's just like, you're just falling into it. And it's just like, it's physical and it's mental and it's spiritual all at the same time. And it's just, it can be exhausting if you can't, what I like to think of as sleeping it off. I can have something really, really terrible said to me or commented to me. Even people that are very well-meaning can say very foul things and they don't realize it. And sometimes I just have to vent a little bit to my wife, and then I can go to bed. And then the next morning I get up, I'm just like, okay, well, let's go do our thing, But if you aren't capable of doing that, like you just hold on to things, you have to figure out how to work through that process, because it will literally kill you.
Yeah. That's one of the things about depression, and I have some experience with that, is that I liken it to tunnel vision. When you start with tunnel vision, you just get these dark areas on the edges of your vision. And that's kind of the way it feels emotionally and spiritually. You've got these issues that just don't want to seem to go away. You can't sleep them off. And if you don't, and if things compound, your vision begins to get narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower. And it's almost of sorts an illusion or a delusion that you don't see the good on the sides anymore. You don't hear the good voices. You're fixating and obsessing on that thing that you just can't seem to get past. And then it begins to just consume your every thought day and night. You lose sleep over it. And people say you just get to a point where it's just not worth living anymore because you cannot shake it.
Yeah.
It won't go away.
Yeah. How'd you get out of that?
A lot of prayer, a little medicinal help, a lot of understanding what depression is. Major depression, not just temporary depression, but major clinical depression, and understanding what it is, developing, some coping mechanisms to know and understand when those things start to become too much, what to do to try and regain sight. And one of those is not being isolated. You need to get out, you need to talk to people more, you need to have somebody in your life, at least one person besides your spouse, that you can just be 100% honest with.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. I don't want this to sound like a counseling session, but how did you find that person?
How does that make you feel?
Yeah. So how did you find that person? I mean, beyond your wife, obviously somebody stepped in and either recognized that or you recognized it and went to them and said, hey, help.
Well, most of it was with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very transparent marriage. Mm-hmm. We both know one another's darkest and deepest struggles. Mm-hmm. And so, she was a tremendous help in that.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. And going back to kind of like this whole like depression and anxiety and all of that, there's been a push here recently from some church leaders. John MacArthur is one of them. He's been really vocal about the idea that there is no such thing as depression. There's no such thing as anxiety. There's no such thing as ADHD. These are all things that just people made up so that they could get you hooked on pharmaceuticals. And I would say that those are the words of a person that has zero knowledge about what mental health actually is.
Sounds like zero compassion.
And, this whole idea of just dismissing something out of hand because you don't agree with X, Y, or Z, you have to be very careful with that because, it is a thing. I can attest to the fact that it is an actual thing. There are actual treatments for it. I can attest to that as well. Mm-hmm. And with the right doctor and with the right counselors and with the right people around you, you can overcome them. Mm-hmm. And God puts those people in your path for a reason. For a person that is a theologian to get up and say that there is no such thing as X, Y, or Z mental health issue, is to say that I know everything that there is to know about the human brain. And you have no clue. You don't know. Even our most brilliant surgeons have very little knowledge on how the human brain works. Mm-hmm. The chemistry involved, the way that neurons fire. We're very limited in the scope of knowledge that we have as far as how the human mind works. And to say that it's just something that the pharmaceutical companies have made up, that's not true either. You can look back to even the 16th century of writings of people that would write about things called humors and things called the glooms and, things of that nature, where people would suffer from depressive states that they couldn't get any solutions from. And so they would typically turn to suicide or alcohol or morphine or, whatever. Opium was a big one. And so, I would challenge any of our religious leaders, any of our spiritual leaders, any of our pastors, teachers, don't be so dismissive of things because you have an axe to grind. It doesn't do anybody any good. And the best thing that you could do for someone who is suffering from depression that is on, say, X, Y, or Z medication or whatever the case may be, be compassionate towards that person and speak Christ into their life. If Christ is going to heal them, if God's going to heal them, he's going to heal them with or without the medication. Mm-hmm. And I said with or without. Mm-hmm. Just because you say with or without doesn't mean that he will do it without. He could use the medication too. Mm-hmm. This is something that happens every day with physiological problems on a daily basis. I would wonder if, some of those people who are challenging these ideas are taking blood pressure medication. Are you taking Tylenol to cure your headache? Are you taking, blood thinners? Are you taking, things for your digestion? It's like your body is designed to fall apart. And we are creating medical mechanisms by which we can live longer.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is mental health. And as mental health grows in its capacity to be able to help people, you're going to see that actually extend people's lives. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, I think it's just, we're easy to pass judgment on people that have, you know, mental illness or that suffer from mental illness. And that's a stigma that we have just got to end.
Yeah.
We just can't do it anymore. It's not benefiting us. Here we have a pastor who potentially committed suicide because, you know, he had X, Y, or Z thing going on. You know, imagine what, if that's true, you know, what led him down a pathway where he never talked to anybody about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that was the part that got me about Jim Putman's recording that he put out to their small group leaders. I don't know if you guys watched it.
Mm-mm.
And he said the thing that bothers him the most about it is that how did he create an atmosphere where Gene could not talk to him, Jim?
Yeah.
How did he create how could his relationship with Gene be such that Gene could not come to him and tell him?
Yeah.
So he's feeling a little bit of responsibility for this.
Well, I'm hoping that we can all learn something from it. I think what happens in a lot of those circumstances is on the opposite side of the stigma against it is the stigma to not appear weak
Mm-hmm.
to your peers. And I think when you have a lot of really strong-willed men around you, it's easy for you to get into a position to where you're like, I don't really want to talk about it because I don't want them to think that I'm weak.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to suck it up and I'm just going to get through it.
The weak link in the chain.
Yep. Yep. And even though that's probably not true, like I can't imagine a scenario where any one of those guys that I consider friends would ever, if I were to express something to them, like let's just say, for instance, that I was to go to Jim Blazin over at North Campus and I was to go to him and I was to say, man, I'm really struggling with this thing, right? I can't imagine a scenario where he would be like, you weak person, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a thing. But we kind of develop that in our heads as men, that that's the way other men are going to respond to us. And we can't think that way. You know, I mean, we have to be ready to be able to be vulnerable enough to say things about our mental state that probably need to be talked about. And, you know, you don't have to be, you know, I mean, you don't have to be super emotional about it or anything. It's just be honest. And it's like, man, I'm struggling. There's times where I'm just like really, really down and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just
Let's talk.
Yeah, just be open and have a conversation about it. You know, it's not a big deal. Everybody goes through it. You know, it's like some people are just, they have a harder time than others.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like we talked about earlier, you know, I think you put that in motion, you know, with the pastoral staff here at ABC because we do, you know, and it's gotten to the point, I believe, and I think you alluded to this a little bit, that we're doing pretty good, all of us. And so it's not a hyper emotional cry time for us in these morning meetings. It's how's it going? You know, we are able to say good, or at some point say, you know what, I did this, and you know this is happening, and I need, you know, we're not even looking for answers. Sometimes we're just putting it on the table.
Yeah. Most of the time, it's this church member said this to me. That's what it ends up being most of the time. Yeah.
This happened.
Yep. And then you just kind of got to like, okay, well, you know, we just kind of got to get through it and everything will be fine.
Well, a lot of times that's all it takes. It's just letting getting it out, letting someone else know, just not being the only one keeping it bottled up. Just share that, and whether they can actually do anything about it or not really isn't the point.
Yeah.
The point is that you're not shouldering it alone. It's no longer in secret, and that's what the enemy loves to do, is divide and conquer, isolate us, get us trapped in our own thoughts or something, and have us avoid sharing that with somebody. So
good word.
Counter that by just tell somebody.
Yeah.
One of my favorite refrigerator magnet sayings is, a burden shared is a burden divided. And a joy shared is a joy multiplied.
It's good.
You know, it is good. I mean, I'm sure it's biblical somewhere. But
I mean, whatever.
That's what we need to do is share our burdens, and we can chop them into pieces.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you take this part, you take this part, and then I only have to deal with this little bit over here.
Yeah.
And you have a joy, you share that, everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So lessons that we can learn from this, you know, I think it's important to understand that not just pastors, but everybody is vulnerable to these feelings. And you know, I think that feeling of anxiety that people get when things are really, really bad, it's there for a reason. It's not that it shouldn't be there. There's a reason that you're feeling that way. If you think about the mind like the body, you know, if your body is hurting in one area or another, it's because it's trying to tell you there's an injury there and to stay off of it. You know, like if you break your leg, you know, it's like your body's going to really hurt because it's like, don't step on this foot.
Yeah, there's a reason for pain.
So pain has a purpose, right? And anxiety is just emotional pain, mental pain, spiritual pain. So, you know, what's the reason? Why is it that you're having this response? And there's two different things with that. Like there's some people who, because of something that is going on in their brain, whether it's because of food or whether it's because of lack of exercise or whatever the case may be. I know for myself, when I was suffering from depression, and it was not because there was anything going on around me, it was there. Like, and I couldn't get rid of it. And, you know, my doctor was very cautious. Like, you got to understand, like, if you go to your doctor and you tell them that you're depressed, your doctor's not sitting there waiting with a list of medications to throw at you. That's not how that works. Like there's people who have not suffered from depression but have an angst against like prescription medication and doctors. They have this kind of scenario built in your mind that you go to your doctor and you say you're depressed, and then the doctor's just sitting there with these pill bottles, throwing pill bottles at you or something, you know? Mm-hmm. And there may be, I'll give you this, there may be doctors out there like that. But if you have the right doctor, and you've thoroughly vetted your doctor to pick the right doctor, he's going to approach it with a lot of caution. And my doctor, when I came to him, it was Dr. Chisholm, and he was a great guy. He approached it with a lot of caution. And he told me right off the bat, he's like, look, we know very little about this. So the best thing that we can do is just try like this, and then try this, a little bit of this, and a little bit of this. And then eventually what's going to happen is you're going to figure out something that works. And it ended up that what worked for me was a medication that's not even a mental health medication. It was actually a medication that was designed for restless legs. And turns out that somehow in the process of helping to fix the restless legs that I was suffering from, that it actually helped with that as well.
Bingo.
But then, like what I discovered and he told me this, he's like, look, most of everything that you do with your mental health, it's either related to your diet or it's related to the level of activity that you have in your life, exercise. Yeah. And he's like, if you will fix your diet and you will fix your lack of activity, most likely you're going to recover. And that's what I did. I started exercising. I started watching what I eat. I cut out basically all sugar out of my diet, except for like at night, I'll have maybe a couple of cookies or something like that. But for the most part, I don't eat a lot of sugar. And what I found was over time, I was able to come off the medication, and, you know, it's like, I don't really need it anymore. because, I've gotten better at other things in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be willing to take the step to go at least talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like your physician, your doctor,
Mm-hmm.
he wants to help you. Like no doctors get into that field thinking, I'm going to make a ton of money on kickbacks from prescription drugs. It's like, that's not even a thing. Like doctors can go to jail for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you get past that? Right. Well, it's like at some point you have to give your trust over, at some point you have to find the person that you're willing to trust. And, I found a doctor that I was willing to trust,
Mm-hmm.
and, you should probably do the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And find someone you can talk to. And and I would say this, like if like their answer is to just start throwing pills at you, just leave.
Yeah. Wrong
Just
guy.
leave. You got the wrong guy.
Mm-hmm.
You want a person that has a cautious approach, that looks concerned about your well-being, not just trying to move you out. If you go to the emergency room, you're going to get one type of doctor.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to your general practicing doctor, you're going to get a different type of doctor. 100% of the time.
And it should be somebody that you can talk to, you can trust.
Yep.
And
But then on the other side of that, those are people that they don't have the ability to control it, so they need help controlling it. But for the most part, that anxiety exists in there to tell you that there's something that you need to do. It might be guilt, or it might be, pain that you're receiving from someone that you just need to forgive someone. It's like in an ordinary circumstance, it could be that there's just something that you need to handle.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, a Christian counselor is right up your alley.
Yeah.
You just need someone to say, look, you're just harboring some unforgiveness and you need to let go of that. And that, I would say, is probably number one on the list
yes, it is.
of things that I deal with in Christian counseling that people are struggling with, is just unforgiveness in one area or another.
Yeah. Bitterness can really make you sick.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, everybody's vulnerable.
Yep. And we need to do our best to combat the stigma. And that's part of what we're doing here this morning. And we've done in this series now for 4 different episodes, is try to help people understand the stigma that is a barrier to this whole situation improving. And we need to normalize this and just make it an issue that we can openly talk about and deal with. And we'll have some progress against it.
Yeah. And the other thing that we need to think about too is that in talking to some of his friends, nobody saw this coming. Like they literally had no clue. It just totally hit them out of the blue. Like if you would have talked to him a day before, you would have had no idea that there was anything wrong. And I know you can draw a lot of speculation from that, and over time the investigation will reveal anything that may or may not have happened. But in reality, I've always gone under the assumption that people who will commit suicide, you're probably never going to know it. And people that typically won't commit suicide are those that are advertising it.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be serious about their situation as well, or that you shouldn't blow that off. You should definitely find them help.
That is a cry for help.
It is. Yeah. And, it might be that call to the suicide hotline that, might help them out, that because those people on the other end of that phone are trained to deal with people who aren't really going to commit suicide, but just want somebody to listen to them.
Yeah.
And so that's a thing as well. Right. But, it really typically is going to happen when you least expect it. Like when you said just a few minutes ago, it's like, we're all doing okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, you should never live under that assumption.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not safe to just assume that everything is fine, because that's when you start getting lulled into this like sense of security that, well, we don't have anything to worry about, so we don't really have anything to talk about. It's like, that's why we do it every Tuesday, because invariably what's going to happen is something's going to creep in and somebody's not going to want to talk about it because we're all fine. We're all fine. It's no big deal, right?
So we're all psychotic. We all have neuroses, and no, I'm joking about that. But I see what you're saying, that we don't want to have an air of, hey, life is good. You know, let's move on.
Yeah.
Well, I think it needs to be a two-way street. Not only we can say to one another, yeah, I'm doing okay, but I give you guys permission to call me out at any time and say, no, really, what is going on? You don't seem like yourself today, or how's that thing going in your life, or did you just lie to me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I'm at that level.
And the neat part about what we do is that we have a time and a place for that, whereas a lot of people don't. The typical Sunday morning, hey, how's it going? Great. You know, how's life? Good. You know, if you grab
baloney,
90% of those people and you pull them aside and say, no, really, what's going on? 9 out of 10 is going to have something. It may be small. Had a flat tire coming into work this morning, or my wife is talking about, you know, leaving me. It can be the full spectrum there. And so, again, I just want to, you know, say thanks, Chris, you know, for putting us in a place where we have a venue to vent. But you're right. We need to take advantage of it. We need to force it.
That was the Lord's leadership, really. You know, after the first couple of times that we talked about mental health, and then, you know, we started kind of focusing on this idea of mental health and started having counselors around, I became painfully aware that there was no mechanism by which our pastors were having the ability to express any hurt that they had in their lives. And so that became a priority. You know, I mean, you can go without a staff meeting. You can even go without a board meeting, but you can't go without mental health. You just can't neglect it, because everything else fails under that. And so, you know, that was all the Lord's leadership. And I'm so thankful that he brought that to us. And it's a good exercise too. It's a good exercise in meekness and the ability to be able to have faith in people, you know, and put your trust in people and say things to people that you know are not going to go and tell everybody else in the world about your issues. You know, I mean, it's nice to have a really secure place to be able to express your kind of deepest thoughts. And sometimes those thoughts can be pretty dark. And so, you know, it's really nice to have that. But yeah, like not getting too comfortable, probably a good idea. You know, you should always assume that somebody's hurting in some way, shape, or form.
So I just may not show up tomorrow because I can tell it's going to be intense.
No, I don't think so. It'll probably be, well, if it's like most weeks, it'll just be us talking about what's going on in the news. That'll end up being what it is. And then we'll have to do some counseling over how stressed we are about the news.
The news.
Yeah. Another question, did pastoring become too much for Gene to handle? Do we ask too much of our pastors? I would say the answer to that question is yes, 100%. The average church, when you hire a pastor, if you are a church of 50 people or less and you hire a pastor, he's typically going to be the only pastor in that church. And you are going to ask him to preach, to teach, to counsel, to lead, to visit, to write, to call, and attend every single meeting, every single event, and every single thing that happens at the church. And so tell me how that's reasonable. You know, it's like, it's so ridiculous. And, you know, I don't like telling people no. You know, sometimes people will come up and they will say, well, you know, it'd really help our ministry if you'd show up, you know, and it's like, and then I start getting recalls of that, you know, leverage your celebrity phrase. And I'm just like, you know, the world is not going to change if I show up to your event. Right. And sometimes I say no on purpose. And it's not even because I don't have the time. It's just, if I say yes to this event, then I have to say yes to this event. And if I say yes to this event, then I have to say yes to this event. And then it just snowballs from there. And then before you know it, you're every single night you're here at the church instead of being at home with your family where you need to be.
I just want to say I appreciate your guardianship of your Fridays and Saturdays. That's sacred to you. And I know that. And I hate having to call you on those days, but sometimes I just gotta call you.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, and it's going to happen. And that I get from my dad. I watched the ministry literally kill my dad. I watched it happen. And it didn't happen through suicide or anything like that. He basically ate himself to death. He was morbidly obese. He had serious heart issues. And just, he did everything.
Yeah.
He did everything. And he never had a day off. Every day he was doing something. I can remember going in there on Saturdays and he'd be sitting at his desk with his typewriter typing up his message for Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm just thinking to myself, why can't we do something,
Mm-hmm.
And so looking back on that, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to do that. And my family is too important to me. My wife is too important to me. And so when Friday and Saturday comes, it's like
detach.
People just know.
Yeah.
It's like unless you're dying, don't bother.
Mm-hmm.
Because
usually when I'm calling,
I'm probably not even going to answer the phone.
You don't.
So I
call Kim.
Yeah,
and I didn't say that. You might want to delete that.
And that's not always true. Like if you leave a message and it's something serious,
yeah, you get back.
I'll call back for sure.
Yeah.
But if you call and then you just don't leave a message and you just hang up, I'm just going to assume it's not important.
Mm-hmm.
If you text me something and it's just kind of trivial, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and if I get a little bit of time and there's nothing else going on, I might call you back. I don't know. It just depends.
Yeah.
But yeah, Friday and Saturday, nope. And you have to guard those days because
people will eat them up.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat.
And I'd also say on all of the things that people expect pastors to do, preaching and teaching, prayer and study were the things that deacons were created to give elders the space to do. And the idea, I don't know where it came from, but this idea that pastors must be the ones that go and visit all the sick, elderly, and those that need to be, or those that are first-time visitors, it's like they need to be the arm of visitation, is not only unbiblical, it's unreasonable. It's like you're asking this person to work all day long to prepare a message, to teach the church, to study, to understand what he's supposed to be teaching, and to lead the church and to do all those things.
All the ministries.
And then at night go and visit people who just visited for the first time, and it's like you're not wanting a pastor, you're wanting a person to do all your work for you. I just, at the beginning of the ministry when I first got here, I just made this determination. It's like, I'm not going to be a visitation pastor. I'm just not going to do it. And if that's not okay, then, I guess you're going to have to fire me and find somebody else because
you found people that could do that.
Well, that's what you have to do. You have to diversify,
a lot of times there are people who are better at it than we are.
Yep.
I mean, that goes to gifting and enabling and empowering people to do the ministry.
But I was blessed in that I had a church that was gracious enough to give me the latitude to be able to do that.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, before I had established authority, when I had authority based on my title, they gave me the grace to be able to do that. And there were times where it was tough because people were like, well, you should have came and visited. And it was like, well, I didn't.
I didn't.
Sorry.
Live with it.
And there were probably times where I should have, and I knew I should have, but I just disobeyed and I paid the cost for that. So, just being transparent, that happens too.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that as pastors, we need to be willing to let go of some things. And then as the church, we need to be willing to allow our pastors to lead in the way that their giftings are. And then also just be gracious. I mean, they're going to fail you. Your pastors are going to fail you at some point because they're people. Can we not get bent out of shape when they mess up? You know what I mean? It's like,
amen to that.
Please let me know how you live so perfectly that you're allowed to chastise someone for messing up, like one time or whatever, and we don't have that issue here really, but I know pastors that, man, if they say something off color in a message, it's like they have a meeting 2 days later for the leadership of the church to chastise them over their failure to produce a message that they approve of or whatever, and I mean, sometimes, guys will call me because they're just like struggling with their churches or whatever. And I'm just like, dude, leave.
Yeah.
Just leave. You don't have to, you don't have to do that. Maybe God called you there just to experience that so that you can go somewhere and find out what it means to be serving with people who actually want to serve with you instead of be served, and
good point.
And so, that's something to think about as well, because it can become too much.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of openings for pastors right now.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. It's because people can be terrible.
Yeah.
And so, it's a very difficult position already. If you're expected to do everything, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just impossible. It'll kill you.
Yeah, I feel sorry for solo pastors in that situation.
Yep.
Where they're barely making enough to survive. Church can't afford to hire any help. Don't have enough volunteers. And there's a lot of need. And there's just no end in sight.
Yeah.
And he just sees, man, I'm just going to spend my life out for this congregation.
I'll take it a step farther. I don't think that a singular pastor in any given situation is actually biblical. I don't see an instance in Scripture where Paul is writing to a church and he refers to elder in the singular.
Yeah.
It's always a plurality of eldership.
He even tells Timothy to appoint elders.
Yep.
In the church.
Yep. Because I don't think it's a job that one guy can do. It's certainly not a job that one single bivocational guy can do.
We had that for years here.
That's not for long.
I'm sorry, that's not a pastor.
Yeah. No.
That's not an elder. I don't know what that is, but it's not an elder, right? And so, maybe it's a person that's helping you navigate through the course of getting to a place where you can get some elders, and maybe it's a person that can be an elder to help a kind of head elder kind of thing. Maybe that's a possibility, but there's no way that a guy can work a full-time job and then try and build a church as well. That's not a thing. And people will always say, well, Paul was a tent maker. It's like, okay, do you really think that Paul spent his time building tents after he got involved in the ministry? Because it seems to me like he is pretty busy. Going from town to town,
writing letters,
fleeing from the law, writing letters, getting shipwrecked. It's like
it was his side hustle. It
Yeah.
wasn't his main hustle.
I mean, I don't think that he was a full-time tent maker that just happened to be the greatest evangelist that ever lived. That's not a thing, right? So, just be careful about how much you're piling up on your pastor, and then help. Help. And then pastors, you don't have to do everything. Find a way for people to help you out. That was the one thing that my dad was not good at. He was not good at relinquishing the ability for people to help him. He just had to do it all on his own. And, that's not healthy either. So, so I think there's definitely some lessons that we can learn from this, and we're kind of getting to the end of it. But, I think that, that we have to remember in all of these circumstances, Romans 8, 1 through 2, that there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. For the law of the Spirit of life has set you free in Christ Jesus from the law of sin and death. And I would say to those that are casting judgment upon Gene, or casting judgment upon the leadership of Real Life, or casting judgment upon his family, stop. God does not condemn him. Why should you? What gives you the ability to condemn them when God does not? And instead of being so judgmental and condemning them and condemning their behavior or whatever, maybe pray for them instead.
Yeah.
Maybe show a little compassion, a little bit of love, a little bit of meekness will go a long way. You know, produce some fruit that is palatable, that people can say, taste and see that the Lord is good.
And if there was something systemic there at that church that pushed Gene into an intolerable spot, it may not have gone away now. It may be continuing with the next pastor. So there may be some work needs to be done there to prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
And if you have a pastor that you have a good relationship with, ask them, are you 100% transparent and accountable to somebody? Do you have somebody you can talk to when this job pushes you into a corner?
Mm-hmm.
I will be that person for you.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that your pastors are well covered on this front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot, but it
For
can
sure.
mean a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. It's tough, man.
It is.
It's tough. I know they're going through it, and I just want, I'm going to give you guys some last words in a second, but just as last words, I'd just like to say I'm thankful for you guys and for all the guys that are on our pastoral staff, our elder board, and the work that they do. It's like we have a wide variety of people, and I think you need all of those people. You need disagreeable people. You need agreeable people. You need people who are amiable. You need people who are resistant. You need people who are willing to debate. You need people who are willing to compromise. You need all of those components, and not any one person can fit that bill. And so, we're very blessed here at Athol Baptist Church to have a pastoral staff of people that have a wide variety of personality traits, character traits, that and different levelings of giftings and things of that nature that really make it work well. And it's not always 100%, and we're always going to have areas that we can improve in, that's for sure. But man, are we on the right track? Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for our congregation and being so supportive of our pastors. We have a very supportive congregation.
Yes, we do.
That I'm really thankful for. So Ken, did you have any last words?
I was just thinking of a way to summarize what the ministry is. And the thing that came to mind is it really is a labor of love. I mean, it's a labor of love in the theological sense that it was Christ who died for us to give us this life, an opportunity for this new life that is based on love. It's a labor of love for us to the congregation, these people that we've shared life with for years and seen their kids come up and grandkids and these things. And you grow to love the congregation. The congregation comes to love their pastor, one or more, whatever the case may be, because they're providing spiritual guidance and leadership in their life and pouring their lives out to serve the congregation. It really is a labor of love. And there must have been something about Gene's situation where the love had a gap or a crack in it, or he'd lost sight of it, whatever it is. I don't know what it is, because love overcomes, right? We know the passage. Love believes all things, endures all things, on and on and on. And something caused a gap in there that Gene just couldn't come out of. And so Yeah. I think we need to keep sight of that.
Yeah.
Where's the love today?
Yeah. It's good. Greg?
And doing a little bit of research. First of all, I think most listeners already know this, but we have a very extensive, I guess would be the word, counseling program here at Athol Baptist Church. So if you are suffering, if you are in need of, just someone to talk to, or if you're in need of some long-term counseling, give us a call here at the church, and we can get you set up. There's a lot going on. We're growing. And one of the things Chris mentioned, we have a pastoral staff that is broad in its ability to help and reach out and do all the things that need to get done in a church. And that is because of the congregation. You guys have allowed us to do that. And so we're here for you. And in a lot of the research, I don't call it research because I didn't spend that much time at it, but in thinking about this particular episode, every time I would look something up, I ended up in the book of Romans. And so there's just so much wisdom in Romans that, we always encourage you to read your Bible, but I'm going to say today, read the book of Romans. And when I say today, read the whole thing. You can do it in probably 30 minutes. Just get there. But I want to leave us with this. And Romans, that we're all pretty much familiar with, as he's looking up what number it is, 8:31. It just went away. Yeah.
Well, while you're looking that up,
Thank you.
let me just say this, that if you know someone that is having suicidal thoughts, or if you were having suicidal thoughts, you can get help. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline, you can call 988, or you can text, or you can call here at Athol Baptist Church, 208-683-2802. And either one of those places can offer you the help that you need. At least give you an ear to talk to. That's what those guys at the Suicide Prevention Hotline do. So are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay,
Romans
good.
8:38. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And so for those of you that are struggling over Gene and his decision, just take heart. He's with the Lord.
That's a great verse. I love that verse. So many, it's applicable in so many ways.
So many places.
Yeah. So many ways. All right. Well, that does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have a comment, question, or an idea for an episode, send us an email at 3p@atholbaptistchurch.org. If your idea gets used in the show, you could be the recipient of the now world-famous 3P coffee mug. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks to Athol Baptist Church and its members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. Until next time, remember the Great Commission: go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples who can do the same. And with that, we are out.